You're listening to America First with Sebastian Gorka, former strategist to President Donald J. Trump.
Despite everything, America remains a proud country with much to be proud of, and no person nor any nationality can stand unlimited, unjustified self-loathing. It will end sooner than we dare think, and it will take down its ghastly and contemptible preceptors with it, including the dismal Pharisees of this administration. That's the kind of writing I want to write when I grow up. That is the closing passage of, I think, one of the best pieces I've seen from our regular friend, just a superlative writer. He is, of course, Lord Conrad Black. The piece is a self-loathing ruling class cannot endure, and we must discuss it. But first, I have another question. Lord Black, welcome back to America First.
Thanks, Sebastian. Always a pleasure to be with you.
As somebody who follows the press, who has been a media mogul himself, an incredibly successful businessman, a follower of Matters American, the treatment of Governor Ron DeSantis by a legacy media organ in the last few days, just your free thought response to what you have witnessed.
An absolute disgrace. You're referring to CBS.
Yes.
It was a sandbag job. It was a deliberately, premeditatedly, and systematically dishonest misrepresentation of the manner in which he had the vaccine distributed in his state of Florida. And it is now clear, because the tape has been unearthed, that he explained laboriously exactly what really happened, which completely debunked the theory that CBS was advancing, and they didn't run it. I mean, it was simply, in traditional terms, an act of total unprofessional dishonesty by a major media outlet, one of the greatest networks in the country, and one, it must be said, of a considerable history, going back to people like Edward R. Murrow and Eric Severide and Walter Cronkite. I mean, they had their limitations, but they were great traditional conduits of generally accurate information, and they respected the distinction, as the American media more or less reasonably well did until comparatively recently, between opinion and comment. You kindly referred to my status as a former media owner, and I employed thousands of journalists in several continents, and always that was our absolute rule. People could write any opinion within reason they wanted, as long as they signed it as opinion, but in reporting, it had to be the straight scoop and not loaded with bias either in the headline or in the story. And we have now reached the point. I saw Lester Holt on television the other day from a competing network, who was a comparatively respectable newsreader, I thought, saying that it is now the duty of all journalists who cover national American politics to present a biased case because the condition of the country requires it. Well, the result of that, of course, is that all polls show that over 80% of Americans don't believe a word they read or hear in the media. And when you have a population that is contemptuous of the need for or value of an independent free media, you are taking a giant step to endanger democracy. And that's where we are. And CBS has, because of this, now the leading role, or at least a contending for leading role, in the self-destruction of the credibility and integrity of the American national political media. And only 2 weeks before, I actually gave him some credit for running that program with Leslie Stahl, exposing the Chinese role in the propagation of the coronavirus and the complicity of the World Health Organization. I thought we were starting to see one of the major networks coming out of the woods, out of the ghastly nether region of just running a constant smear job on the incumbent president in the place of what should be news and comment. referring to President Trump, of course. But they flopped back into their bad habits, but they've been exposed, and let's hope that the walloping they're taking in other still respectable, vibrant parts of the media teaches them a lesson that they learned.
Well, I'm afraid it hasn't. 20 seconds ago, my producer, Jeff, sent me a piece breaking on the Daily Wire. CBS has released an official response to the brouhaha of the last 24 hours, where they are doubling down on the 60 Minutes coverage, the hit piece, the smear on Governor DeSantis. And the end of the statement, I think, is, I'll just read that. Our story on Sunday night speaks for itself. I think it does. Now let's dissect this one further level. We're talking to Conrad Black, Lord Black. Follow him at Conrad M. Black on Twitter. He is, of course, the author of A President Like No Other, Donald J. Trump and the Restoring of America. There is this, the key smear is that this chain of pharmacies and grocery stores called Publix was part of Governor DeSantis's vaccination program, and because they donated $100,000 to his campaign, they were rewarded with the pay for play. Now, the evidence that this was fraudulent was from the 2.5 minutes of the press conference where Governor DeSantis explained who else was involved, how it was a small part of Publix, how 90% of the aged population are within 1.5 miles, and that's why it made sense. The fact that that wasn't a private interview, it was a public press conference, and they felt comfortable removing the 2.5 minutes that destroyed their accusation. What does it speak to? What attitude, what mindset does it speak to, Lord Black, that anybody could find the true evidence, but they felt comfortable in running the smear job?
And added to that, it also came out, not from the exchange with the interviewer, but otherwise, spontaneously, that Democratic officials within the state of Florida, Democratic Party officials, had approved and urged this course of action, and that Publix had, or rather, was it Walmart or Publix? Walmart, I think. Anyway, had made a larger contribution to the Democrats than to the Republicans.
Yes.
The answer, I think, Publix. Well, the answer to your question, I think, is that this is just completely indefensible, and they can, to use that ghastly, sanctimonious Watergate expression, stand by their story as much as they want. The fact is, their story is a pack of lies, and anyone can see that it's a pack of lies, and they will pay for this. This is just another wound to the credibility of the media, and it's a terrible thing. The media should actually command some respect, but they have to earn it to command it, and they have fallen. They have really fallen right into the inferno here of mere advocacy and destructive, defamatory advocacy, not a legitimate argument couched as news, but simply the propagation of outright defamatory falsehoods designed maliciously to destroy the reputation of the individuals they're referring to.
But let me ask, let's pull up to 30,000 feet. Is there anything you have witnessed, Lord Black, in the last 5 years, let's say, that indicates any self-reflection and change of course from the legacy mainstream media?
I am afraid not. Now, there may be some things, but closest I can come to anything hopeful at this point is the 4 Pinocchios that the Washington Post gave President Biden over his absolutely, utterly outrageous references to the Georgia electoral reform law as Jim Crow on steroids and Jim Eagle and all that kind of thing. I thought that when the Washington Post did that, it was a sign of hope. I think fundamentally, Sebastian, we can repose some hope in the fact that in the very intelligent and becoming strategy that former President Trump is following of issuing press statements that are reasoned and not excessive and are appropriate
Right.
to what he's commenting on, and giving occasionally, he's about ready for another one, good, very well put together speeches like the one to CPAC. The Trump hate drumbeat collapses. They can't go on simply denouncing Trump because he is at the moment a retired president making sensible statements, and all that business of trying to prove an insurrection and so forth. It's all collapsed. The idea of a commission like was set up after 9/11, which was an assault from international terrorists. After all of that nonsense is just disappearing.
Hope.
And
We're out of time in this segment, but hope does spring eternal. We will continue our discussion with Lord Conrad Black here on America First. Stay on this channel.
Out! Out! Do you understand English? Get out of this property. Go. So go. Go. And don't come back without a warrant. Out, Nazi. Out. Out. You understand? Nazis are not welcome here. Out. And don't come back without a warrant. Do not come back without a warrant. You understand that? You're not welcome here.
God bless Father Artur from Poland, telling the Calgary police and the local health officials, get out of my church on Good Friday, you Nazis. And it must be spreading. It must be a virus. Now we have a restaurant in Vancouver, the Corduroy, where the patrons shouted at the officials trying to close the restaurant down, get out of here. I had to play that because of our guest, our regular guest and contributor. He's Lord Conrad Black. What's going on in Canada, Lord Black?
Well, parts of the country are finally not putting up with it anymore. We've had the shutdown in varying levels here in different provinces. Canada's divided into provinces, as has been the case in the U.S. And the two jurisdictions you just cited, Calgary and Vancouver, have been more on the model of Texas and Florida than New York and California. And Canadians are very law-abiding, mild-mannered, non-violent people, low crime rate, very safe country, but they are terribly attached to basic freedoms, and they just can't take it anymore. But who can? It's an outrage. All of it is.
We need to see hundreds of more videos like that. Where are these people? Come out of the woodwork and assert your freedoms. We're talking to the author of A President Like No Other, Lord Donald J. Trump, and the Restoring of America. Follow Lord Black at Conrad M. Black. You're very hard to classify. The taxonomy for Lord Black is difficult, given everything you've achieved in the media, in business, as a successful businessman, not just an author and a historian. Your reaction to companies, massive, ginormous companies like Coca-Cola, Delta, and United getting involved in not electioneering, but commenting on bills to do with states and how they run their elections, Lord Black?
Well, I think, Sebastian, if that's all they were doing, if these people, the executives referred to, and the heads of companies you mentioned and others, if they just made a plausible statement of their viewpoint on a legitimate matter of public interest, and it was clear that they had actually looked into it and knew something about it and had an arguable viewpoint, I think that would be fine. I think that's traditionally a role that major executives, heads of great corporations, often have performed. And it is absolutely right that the leaders of American finance and industry, corporate America, should be heard, not just the Chamber of Commerce, not just the leaders of organized labor, but the executive leadership of the country. I mean, they are, after all, at the head of the greatest private sector in the world, and these are, many of them, huge and very successful companies. All of that is fine. But what we have here are people in that position who should behave in that way being pressured by ridiculous and contemptible groups threatening them and just caving in the name of their companies on behalf of all of their shareholders and employees and stakeholders, caving in, rolling over like poodles, and uttering absolute nonsense. And it's a disgrace, and it is the collapse of yet another pillar of American democracy. I mean, intelligence, highest levels of the intelligence agencies and the Justice Department were clearly politicized.
Yes.
And lent themselves to these false warrants demanding illegal domestic surveillance of people on the basis of that pastiche of lies created and commissioned for and paid for by the Democratic campaign against President Trump. That was a serious compromise of that sector. The media we were just talking about, now 85% of Americans don't believe a word of it, and they're right not to believe a word of it. That's another pillar of democracy that has wobbled and essentially crumbled, although these things can be rebuilt. And now we have the executive class being besmirched and demeaned by these lackeys of absolute partisan falsehoods. And it's a disgraceful thing. If I were a shareholder of any of those companies, I'd move that the individuals involved be sacked. Now, I suppose the institutions would bring in their votes in favor of them, but they should be challenged. They are disserving their corporations.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking to the author of the latest piece at American Greatness, amgreatness.com. A self-loathing ruling class cannot endure, Lord Conrad Black. Lord Black, everybody needs to read this article. We're posting it right now on our Twitter and Facebook feeds. And it opens with this discussion of America's national mythos. Every nation has one. And the fact that now we have, you use the phrase, an official regime of lies, and millions of Americans brainwashed into the false view that they live in an evil country. And your argument is, and I encourage everyone to read the piece, that sooner or later this has to collapse. This tissue of lies, this house of cards has to collapse. My question to you is, how long can it take for that collapse to begin?
Terribly hard to predict that, and so it's very hard to answer. But in my experience, I'm unfortunately, I suppose, old enough that I remember back to the McCarthy era. But it's all through the years since then, and that's nearly 70 years ago. I was very little, I'm happy to tell you at least. There comes a point when the tide turns and good sense prevails. And you had it then when it really started, and it was before my time, when McCarthy made his very long speech accusing General Marshall, who was a great man and a great statesman and a soldier statesman, and accusing him of giving Eastern Europe and China to the communists, which was simply outrageous. And it started and then it grew, and then eventually, of course, he was censored and it all stopped. When the Vietnam issues got completely out of control, the United States was being accused within of evil motives for attempting to prevent the communist takeover of South Vietnam in accordance with its treaty obligations. Mr. Nixon, a much maligned man, but a great president who is gradually emerging from the terrible defamations that were inflicted on him, when he said, "Let us remember, North Vietnam cannot defeat or humiliate the United States. No power on earth can do that except the United States," and called for the support of the silent majority, it enabled him to withdraw, maintaining a non-communist government in Saigon. Unfortunately, the Watergate business brought everything down, but at least he that particular issue turned. And these things do turn. And there comes a point when somebody does something and instantly, but almost imperceptibly, it changes opinion, and that's going to happen.
We are hopefully getting closer every single day to that critical mass. In the meantime, if you want to educate yourself on what really happened with regards to Richard Milhouse Nixon, read our guests, A Life in Full. I'm Sebastian Gorka. Thank you, Lord Black. This is America First. Your call's next here on the Salem Radio Network.